Welcome to Who's That Pokemon, the most in-depth Pokemon anime rewatch podcast on the entire internet. If you didn't know, this is a retrospective look back on the Pokemon anime series, episode by episode from the very beginning. This show has been airing for over 20 years now and has over 1,000 episodes, yet it seems to get neglected by Pokemon fans, so I thought it was about time we got a podcast entirely dedicated to it. And before we jump into today's episodes, I wanted to apologise just in case this episode runs a little short. These episodes are true blue, absolute fair dinkum filler. It's just, you're scraping the bottom of the barrel for stuff to sort of analyse and pick apart here. Not a whole lot is going on. A little bit of a spoiler, but they're not great episodes either, so if it does run a little short, I apologise. I'm trying my best here. The first episode today is the 33rd episode of the Indigo League series titled The Flame Pokémon-athon. The Japanese title is The Great Fire Pokemon Race. This episode first aired in Japan on November 11, 1997, and in the United States on October 21, 1998. So a bit of trivia for this episode already. This episode in Japan earned the series its highest TV ratings ever. It did a 18.6% rating, which, this is not just the highest rating of this season or of this series or whatever. This is the highest episode, or highest rated episode of the series, period. It's pretty crazy to think that this episode, which is nothing special about it, nothing major happens in it, it's pretty crazy to think that this is the episode that is the highest rated of all time, and I don't ever think it's going to be topped. Maybe one day if the Pokemon series ends, maybe that would be able to bring in the ratings for, or able to top it, but yeah, I can't see it ever happening, and it's just for a random episode. On this day in Pokemon history for the Japanese air date, today is Fushigi Yamada's birthday. She voiced Max. And it's also Tatsuhisa Suzuki's birthday, and he is most notable for voicing Barry. So, two voice actor birthdays there. On this day in history for the American air date, we covered it recently, so I'm going to skip over that. The Imdb rating was a 7.7. This episode is pretty unremarkable for something getting a 7.7. I'm not sure why fans seem to enjoy it so much, but yeah, it's got a 7.7 on IMDb. The screenplay was written by Atsuhiro Tomioka. This is his 8th episode that he's written for the show, which gives him back the lead. And the director for this episode is Yuji Asada. This is his 7th episode in the director's chair, which gives him the most episodes. So the most episodes directed and the most episodes written combining here to write an episode that has not much consequence on the overarching story. We don't have any recurring or major human character debuts here, but we do have quite a few Pokemon debuts, which we've been seeing quite a lot recently. Most episodes have been introducing at least a handful of new Pokemon for the first time, so they're kind of really rushing through the Pokédex at this point. We have the debuts of Sandslash, Nidorina, Ponyta, Rapidash, Electrode, Rhyhorn, and Tauros, and the Who's That Pokemon for this episode is Ponyta. With that said, it's now time to jump into the episode summary and discussion. Ash and his friends arrive in Safari Land near the Safari Zone, where they come across a Tauros ranch. Wanting to catch one, believing they are now in the Safari Zone, Ash tries to have Pikachu face down the stampede, but Pikachu refuses because he is massively outnumbered. When Pikachu sends out Charmander, it is immediately pinned by a Growlithe. After a brief trade of flamethrowers by the two Fire-type Pokemon, Ash and friends are introduced to Lara Laramie of the Laramie Big P Ranch, which is a ranch that preserves and raises wild Pokemon. Brock immediately recognizes the name, as it is said that Pokemon bred by the Laramie clan are of a superior standard. After Ash realizes that they are not in the Safari Zone, Lara invites them to the Big P Pokemon race that will be held the next day. Lara intends to race with her Ponyta, a Pokemon whose mane will burn anyone it does not trust. When Ash tries to touch Ponyta, his hand is burned and he has Squirtle put out the flames. Lara's main opposition in the race is Dario, a dojo trainer. Lara explains the winning team will be named as an honorary member of the Laramie clan.
What's that thing?
Growlithe, a puppy Pokemon of pleasant demeanor and great diligence. It drives enemies away with barks and bites.
Growlithe? All right, Charmander, flamethrower attack! So it's a fire type too. Charmander, return!
I do sort of like the foreshadowing of Ash wanting to catch a Tauros here. It's kind of cool that, you see him really wanting to catch these Tauros, but they're obviously owned by someone, so he can't. But then a couple episodes from now, he's going to catch a whole bunch of Tauros. He's going to get... But it's one of those be careful what you wish for, Ash moments, because he catches he catches a herd. It basically catches how many Pokemon or how many Tauros are shown on screen here. I thought Ash was very unconcerned about a Growlithe just sort of flying out of nowhere and coming to sit on his Charmander. Like, he doesn't even act too shocked that a Growlithe's just flown out of nowhere to sit on his Pokemon. Yeah, it's just water off a duck's back for Ash. We also have a pretty big error here. So at the beginning and the end of this episode, the narrator states that the group is in the Safari Zone. However, they're pretty clearly on Laramie Ranch, part of the Pokemon Reserve. I'm not entirely sure why they did this. It might have been done because the Safari Zone episode was skipped. But what makes this change even more ridiculous is that if you fast forward to the end of the episodes, 4Kids had both Lara Laramie and the narrator talk about how Ash is heading to the Safari Zone, even though he's supposedly already there now, according to the narrator. And then when we go to the next episode, which we'll cover shortly, the narrator then refers to the location as the Safari Zone again, or like it's being referred to as the Safari Zone. It's just, it's so clunky and weird. I'm not sure what 4Kids are doing here. It's also a really nice juxtaposition of the narrator saying that they're in the Safari Zone, and then almost immediately Lara comes out and says there's no catching allowed here. It's just, 4Kids they clearly took these episodes off. It's no surprise that Brock loves a Big P Pokemon. He's a real big fan of that Big P. On a more serious note, Lara Laramie is voiced by series veteran Lisa Ortiz. And we also have a dub edit here. In the Japanese version, Lara never states that she is related to the Laramie family, while in this episode, in the dub version, I don't know if she outright states it, but it's pretty well implied that she's part of the family. So yeah, it's kind of a little bit weird there. At the festival in Laramie Village, while many are cheering Lara on, Dario arrives to tell Lara that her Tauros have suddenly begun attacking each other over a bout of confusion. After they arrive on the scene, Lara tells Growlithe to tame the Tauros, but during all this, Ponyta is spooked, causing Lara to be thrown off and injuring her arm. As Ash tries to rein in Ponyta, it's revealed that Team Rocket spooked the Tauros that led to Lara's incapacitated state at the request of Dario. Dario intends to win the competition by any means necessary, while Team Rocket seeks to make money from the Laramie fortune.
What's that? Lara! Ponyta!
Lara!
I think I'm okay. Don't move that arm! Whoa, Ponyta! Settle down!
There are just so many Old West accents going on here. They're really playing up the fact that they're on a ranch and they're going real just cartoony with the voices. I'm not a huge fan of the voices, but they're not egregiously bad. They're not too grating to listen to. Dario is voiced by Maddie Blaustein, which, I mean, Maddie is basically just doing every second character of the day at this point. There's also a neat bit of trivia here. Pokemon-athon, the fourth ending theme of the original series, is heard as background music in this episode during the festival scene, and that stays in the dub. It's one of the rare times that the dub doesn't get rid of a piece of the original music from the Japanese, and it's especially weird because it's a vocal song. It's in Japanese and it's vocals, so it's strange that they keep it, and it's even more strange when you sort of factor in that the song is radically different to the style of music that 4Kids has been using. So it really does stand out. Like, you hear it, and I'm sure even if you didn't know that it was a Japanese song being kept in, I feel like it would probably, an alarm bell would go off in your brain saying, this is a weird sort of sound that you don't usually hear in the show. There's also another dub edit here. In this scene where Lara breaks her arm, it's actually longer in the original Japanese version. When she falls off of Ponyta and her arm hits the ground, the impact animation lasts for 1 second, or 30 frames. That impact animation in the English dub lasts for 1/10 of a second, or 3 frames. But actually, after the Pokemon Shock incident, they changed a bunch of the episodes in Japan, and I believe they got that version, so it's sort of not really a dub edit, but it is, compared to the original version, I suppose. We should also note that Lara's arm was only said to be hurt in the Japanese version, but in the dub they actually say that it's broken, which is pretty brutal for the dub. Usually it would be the other way around. And really, the way that Lara holds her arm makes it seem like she really shattered her elbow into pieces. It seems truly nasty. I wasn't expecting it to be so brutal. And finally, Dario must be pretty damn evil to be knowingly and willingly working with Team Rocket. He's probably one of the I guess, most evil antagonist we've run into so far in the show. He's up there with Damien, probably. So we're back at the Laramie household, and with her injured arm, Lara's not going to be able to ride Ponyta, but after seeing Ash try to rein in Ponyta, she tries to convince Ash to take her place. At first, Ponyta is reluctant and burns Ash again, but Lara insists that both stand to gain from winning, with Ash improving his training skills and Ponyta from its upbringing. Ash and Ponyta use the entire night to prepare for the race. At the race, many pairs have gathered at the start line, among them Dario and Dodrio, Ash and Ponyta, Brock and Onix, Misty and Starmie, as well as the all-Pokemon team of Pikachu and Squirtle. When the race starts, Dario and Dodrio quickly take the lead, while Pikachu and Squirtle quickly fall to the back of the pack, though they do eventually catch up. At the same time, Team Rocket make two well-aimed slingshots that spook a Tauros, which runs into a neat arena, and they take their frustrations out on each other. After the starting sprint, there's a steep uphill portion where Pikachu is forced to push Squirtle up the hill, putting them far behind once again. The racers then come upon a downhill section where another violent accident occurs. An Electrode and its trainer roll down the hill uncontrollably, and a pitfall trap dug up by Team Rocket manages to take it out. This gives Dario a significant lead, while Electrode's explosion attack manages to incapacitate a Sandslash, Raticate, but most importantly, Ash and his Ponyta. Ash and Ponyta, however, are able to continue thanks to Pikachu's Thundershock, giving them the needed zap to be revived.
And they're off on this exciting Pokemon Challenge race! When the dust settles, we'll be able to see who's in the early lead. Now the contestants have left the stadium and are on the first part of the obstacle course. And Dario riding Dodrio has pulled away from the pack! If he keeps up this blistering pace, he'll be unstoppable!
You can beat him, Ash!
I really got to question why this race in the middle of absolutely nowhere is so popular. It's really packed out. It's sort of like the Bunta Eve classic in Star Wars The Phantom Menace. There's just a bunch of people watching this random race in the middle of like a desert. It's really, really strange to see. Also, why is Pikachu racing on Squirtle? It just makes no sense why that is happening. It's just so weird that they would let an all-Pokemon team enter. Because at that point, why don't you just have like Pokemon enter in the Pokemon race without the humans? Also, why is Misty racing on Starmie? Like, how is that even possible? When they take off here, it's just sort of gliding along. It feels like that should be illegal. Like, would you be able to enter a flying type Pokemon and sort of just fly as the crow flies straight to the finish line? The rules of this race are very undefined. Similarly, how does Ash being electrocuted revive him and get him back into the race? I really question the logic of that. Usually that incapacitates Ash, but instead it does the complete opposite. It's also fun to note that this race here is sort of similar to the bike race that's featured in the Pokemon Adventures manga chapter, Wake Up Your Snorlax, which it's a bike race, but they use a whole lot of Pokemon during it to sort of, I guess, clear obstacles and that sort of thing. So they're both pretty similar to one another. Further up ahead is a stepping stone portion, which Dario and Dodrio cross with ease. However, another two of the entrants are forced out of the competition, with Brock's Onix being fearful of water, and a farmhand with his Rhyhorn attempting to cross a stone, which eventually sinks. This leaves only 4 teams still racing. While Ash and Ponyta navigate the stones, Starmie and Squirtle swim across the water easily. At the next portion, teams must make a stop and allow their Pokemon to eat an entire plate of Pokemon food before sprinting to the finish. Dario and Dodrio are the first to arrive, but the other racers catch up, whilst Dodrio's heads fight over who gets to eat first.
Go, Dodrio! That's okay. We tried.
Too bad, folks. Rock Pokemon can't deal with water, so Onix is out of here. And looks like surf's up for Pikachu. Squirtle and Starmie are performing like true blue water Pokemon.
I'll keep on going, Brock!
Not much to say about this section. It's just a bunch of racing happening here. I did enjoy the Rhyhorn sinking in the water. I thought that was really funny. And Brock also giving up, like seeing the water and just being like, yep, well, that's us done. It's actually a really funny moment. Probably the funniest moment of the episode. I do sort of question the validity of a race that essentially disqualifies certain types of Pokemon from entering. Like, it kind of sucks that they are unable to sort of race here. You have to be a very specific type of Pokemon to actually be a chance in this race. Desperate to eliminate the other 3 teams, Dario is forced to use Team Rocket's assistance once more, which leads to Ash and Misty learning of Dario's alliance with Team Rocket. Ash tells Pikachu and Squirtle, who had both been scarfing down Pokemon food during Team Rocket's motto, to take care of Team Rocket, but Arbok's glare paralyzes them, while Starmie is blinded by Weezing's sludge. This allows Dario enough time to take off towards the finish. Misty decides to handle Team Rocket and implores Ash and Ponyta to keep going. Team Rocket causes Ponyta to literally get fired up, shocking Arbok. Weezing tries to attack Ponyta despite James telling it not to use its gas, but Ponyta's flames ignite Weezing's smog and it explodes, sending Team Rocket flying. So just how on earth does Dario not straight up win the race while Ash is caught up in all of the Team Rocket commotion? Misty does tell Ash to like leave and go, but Ash doesn't. It really seems like Dario should just win by like a good few minutes here with how long Ash and Misty are caught up in this. It's just, yeah, Dario must really suck, or maybe it's the classic, the tortoise and the hare, and he's out in front and he's sort of taking the foot off the gas thinking he's got it in the bag. So Ash is now desperate to make up ground, and he and Ponyta race towards the finish line. When Ash and Ponyta do catch up, Dario then orders one of the dojo heads to peck Ponyta, slowing it down. Dario then speeds off, taking the lead. Everyone is then startled when Ponyta begins to evolve through sheer will to win into the much faster Rapidash. Ash and Rapidash catch up to Dario and by a nostril manage to overtake him to claim the victory in a photo finish. Believing that he had been cheated, Dario orders Dojo to attack Rapidash, but he is sent flying back by a kick from its powerful hooves. Lara proudly holds the winner's flag and Rapidash nuzzles Ash.
Ponyta just evolved into Rapidash!
Man, this is incredible! Ponyta has evolved into Rapidash, the fastest sprinter in the world of Pokemon!
I can't believe it!
Here comes Rapidash, who has a top speed of over 100 miles an hour! And Rapidash has caught up! They're neck and neck, heading for the finish line!
Come on, Dodrio!
Rapidash!
It's down to the wire! An incredible upset! Rapidash makes an amazing comeback to win this Pokemon Challenge!
There really has been a lot of clutch evolution recently. We saw Sabrina evolving her Abra into a Kadabra in the middle of the battle, which if it didn't evolve, it was going to get curb stomped without a doubt because Abra can't do anything except teleport. Then we saw Koga evolving his Venonat into a Venomoth at the start of the last gym battle, and now Ponyta evolves into Rapidash just to come through in the clutch to win the Flame Pokémon-athon, the big Laramie P race or whatever this thing is called. So yeah, they're really a big fan of clutch evolution at the moment. We do have an error here on the finish line. The finish line banner reads Ghoul instead of Goal. It's a pretty funny error actually, and it's pretty prominent. There's a real photo finish down at the Ghoul. And speaking of the photo finish, apparently they don't need any sort of replay to determine what is literally a result separated by a hair. I could barely tell who won. And then, they don't even go to a photo finish or anything. The announcer just has godlike eyesight apparently, and he's just like, yep, Rapidash and Ash are the winners here. As the festivities wrap up, Ash and his friends bid farewell to the Laramie Ranch and continue on their way to the Safari Zone. Meanwhile, Dario, who blames Team Rocket for his loss, has tied them to a tree to scold them. His dojo delivers its own revenge, pecking the trio mercilessly after Meowth insults it. So again, it's kind of weird with Lara at the end here telling Ash that the Safari Zone is just ahead when they were supposed to be in it, according to the narrator, and they don't even arrive at it in the next episode. It's just really, really poor from 4Kids. It's just, everything is very muddied and unclear here. It's also weird that the episode sort of ends with Dario, taking the loss out on Team Rocket. It feels like we don't really see Dario get his comeuppance too much. He just he does get kicked, but then he's sort of beating up on Team Rocket as if it was Team Rocket were the bad guys here, which they are the bad guys, but Dario's definitely the bad guy here. He's the one that goes out and hires them. They didn't come to him as far as I know. But that's the end of our first episode. I did say it was going to be a short one, probably. My thoughts on this episode are that it's quite a boring episode. I just really couldn't care less about anything that's going on here. It's boring, yet it somehow doesn't feel like it drags on. So I guess it's not too bad in that aspect, and it could definitely be worse. They could have made the, 21 minutes this episode goes for feel like 41 minutes. So it's not too bad in that aspect. I can honestly say I literally hadn't thought about this episode in decades, and after making this episode of the podcast, I'm probably going to go back to not thinking about it for future decades to come. There's just not a whole lot to say about it. It doesn't have anything going on. It's just a bland episode. It's not even so bad that it's good, has any egregiously bad moments that you can really dunk on. It's just nothing episode. So we've got one major event here, and it is very flimsy definition of a major event. Jesse's Arbok is revealed to know Poison Sting and Glare, which I know they count these as major events on Bulbapedia, but personally I don't count these unless Unless the episode is specifically about learning a move, I just don't see how it's even remotely important. Like, just having them bust out a move out of nowhere, it really isn't. It's just, it's not even remotely interesting. You don't even pick up on it. And a lot of the times they just use they use moves. I keep saying episodes. They use these moves and then never use them again. So, it's just, I have a hard time counting that as a major event. Ash's win-loss record is obviously still at 7 wins and 5 losses, and he's still on a 4-win streak. If we were talking about his wins and losses in random Pokemon races, well, he would be 1 win and 0 losses. But with all of that said, it's time to jump into our Pokemail question of the episode segment. It was tough to come up with a question for this week, considering the episode was so kind of meh. But I would like to ask all of you, if you were involved in a Pokemon race and you could use any Pokemon whatsoever, it was, anything goes, which Pokemon would you use? What would you be your go-to pick in a Pokemon race? So with the first episode covered, let's jump into our second episode of the week. Our second episode for today is the 34th episode of the Indigo League series titled The Kangaskhan Kid. In Japan, the episode was titled Kangaskhan's Lullaby. This episode aired on November 18, 1997 in Japan and on October 22, 1998 in the United States. So I've got nothing of note for the American air date, but there is so much going on here for the Japanese air date. Firstly, today is Hayley's birthday. Who is Hayley, you're asking? Well, she's the main character of My Pokemon Ranch, the original Pokemon box or Pokemon home on the Wii. I feel like it's sort of been lost to time, but when I as I've mentioned a bit on the podcast, around the time of Platinum, I really got back into like Pokemon hardcore. Like I really fell in love with it again. And because of that, I just have such fond memories of everything Gen 4 related. Even My Pokemon Ranch, which I didn't even own, but I was so hyped by the idea of it because you could get a Mew and a Fione or a Fione. I'm not really sure how to pronounce that. Whatever the breeding offspring of Manaphy is. And yeah, I just thought it was so cool. I always wanted it, but I never got it. Probably because like it was something I wanted, but when you're a kid and you have like very limited access to money, you're going to be very choosy with what you do with it. And I could never sort of justify buying a glorified Pokemon storage system just because I'd get the chance to have a Mew. Like, as a kid, you're just like, I can do that, or I can save up and buy Pokemon Battle Revolution or Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Like, it's a no-brainer when you consider that, but I mean, if I was some sort of rich kid, some rich kid with access to all the funds in the world, I definitely would have bought My Pokemon Ranch. It was something that weirdly appealed to me. Then we have in 1998, the Game Boy Color was released in the US, which the Game Boy Color basically changed my life. It allowed me to play Pokemon for endless hours, and it really sort of helped spur my Pokemon addiction, I guess you could say. I can't say enough about how fondly I look back on the the Game Boy Color. I remember the Game Boy Color that I had, the first one that I had, it was Australian themed. It was really weird. It was like green and gold, and it had Aussie on the front. It was a real weird thing. I don't know why they had an Australian themed Game Boy, but it was there. And then eventually the screen crapped out on that because I dropped it, and I eventually got another one, which, thank God. But that was just, one of the normal colors. I think it was, a greenish color. So, yeah. Then, in 2001, the GameCube was released in the US, and I did not have the GameCube. I didn't have a Nintendo home console until the Wii, so I missed out on the GameCube. But I looked on in absolute envy. My best friend had a Nintendo 64, so, when you're a kid, you're basically, spending your life at your friend's house and stuff. So it was like I had a Nintendo 64, so I still got to play Smash, Mario Kart, Pokemon Stadium, Mario Party, all of those sort of cool things, GoldenEye obviously, on the Nintendo 64, but nobody I knew had a GameCube, so I never got to play it, and I sort of looked on in envy in sort of gaming magazines and that sort of thing when they would advertise Luigi's Mansion, the Pokemon home console games, and I was just like, God, I would kill to have this. And I had a PS2 with so many games, so it's be happy with what you got, but I always looked on in envy of the GameCube and was sort of just man, if I had that, my life would be complete. And part of that reason is Gale of Darkness, which was released on this day in 2005 in Europe. And I still haven't played Gale of Darkness or Colosseum. I can't wait to get to them eventually in my Gotta Play 'em All series over on YouTube. Like, I just really want to see what it's all about, and I hope they live up to the sort of the expectations and the hype that surround them. And finally, in 2012, the Wii U was released in the US, which, yes, the Wii U was a massive failure. I actually called it as a little dipshit kid. I saw everybody going off about the Wii U, but I'd been burned by the Wii. It sort of just fizzled out, and there wasn't a whole lot going on for the console. And I was like, no, this Wii U is going to be a failure. This does not look good. And I was somehow right. I had no, real knowledge of the gaming industry, and somehow I pulled out of my ass that I knew that the Wii U would be a flop. It was also a bit of a disappointment when it comes to sort of Pokemon. Like, it wasn't a big Pokemon console. It had Pokken Tournament, or Pokken Tournament, however you want to pronounce it. And I think it had a Rumble game, and it had real minor representation on there, and it didn't really jive with Pokemon for whatever reason. And I'm sure the fact that they didn't have any major Pokemon games on it probably hurt it as well. So the IMDb rating for this episode is a 6.4, and we usually just kind of gloss over this a little bit, but this is significant. For those of you who have a keen ear and are really keeping up with this podcast, you'll notice that this is the lowest rated episode of the series so far. And in fact, it's the lowest rated episode overall of the Indigo League series. We wouldn't actually see an episode that's rated lower on IMDb until Flower Power in the Johto Journeys. So, yeah, that's pretty telling that just smack dab in the middle of the most nostalgia-driven season, you don't see an episode that gets rated lower on IMDb until Johto Journeys. Yeah, so, when I saw that, I was like, oh god, what am I getting myself into here? The screenplay was written by Junki Takagami, which is his 7th episode written, and the director was our boy Osamu, and I still haven't looked up his last name because I am stubborn. This is his 6th episode directed, and it goes without saying that both of them, this is their lowest rated episode of all time. The debuts slow down quite a bit here. We don't have any major human character debuts, obviously, which we've sort of not had for quite a while. But the Pokemon debuts, it's limited to just one here. It's Kangaskhan, which is quite different compared to all the debuts we've been seeing recently. Obviously, the Who's That Pokemon is Kangaskhan as well. And with that said, it's brought us to our episode summary and discussion. As the group travels through what they believe to be the Safari Zone, Ash spots a Chansey and gets ready to throw a Pokeball, but it turns out to be Ranger Jenny in a Chansey hat. She points a rifle at Ash and arrests him for Pokemon poaching. She takes the group back to the station and explains that they're in a Pokemon preservation area where it's illegal to catch Pokemon. Ash tells Officer Jenny that he didn't know, so she lets him off with a warning. Almost immediately after, she sees a red dot on her radar, signaling that there are more poachers in the area.
After crossing the grassland, our heroes find themselves in the Safari Zone, where wild Pokemon roam free, just waiting to be captured.
Monkey! 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 Wow, this place is like a dream. Pokemon wherever you look. It must be the Safari Zone. Let's start catching them.
So, why does the narrator again say that they're in the Safari Zone? Why do they keep saying that they're in the Safari Zone? Why do you keep teasing the Safari Zone? It's just baffling. And I mean, at this point in time, 4Kids surely knew that the Safari Zone episode was going to be skipped. And it's, if you know that that's going to be skipped, surely you would go out of your way to not even mention the Safari Zone, because they're really hyping it up here and they don't need to be doing that. If I was them, I would be playing it down as much as possible. I'd be trying to not mention the Safari Zone because it leaves a gaping wide plot hole. And also there's no payoff for you've spent multiple episodes talking about how they're going to get there and then they never get it. So many people on the internet have stories about how when it was sort of in syndication, they would watch it and then they'd miss the episode where Tauros would be caught. They'd think they missed the episode where Tauros would be caught and they're like, oh, well, I guess I'll just have to catch it again. And it would keep looping and they'd keep thinking that they'd missed this one specific episode until years later on the internet they find out that no, this episode doesn't actually exist in English. Also some weirdness going on here with Officer Jenny trying to straight up murder Ash here. She is just packing heat with a rifle And we also see later on James will shoot tranquilizers straight into Pokemon with the tranquilizer gun, which makes the next episode being banned seem just so bizarre. Because that episode is widely regarded to be banned because of the use of firearms. Yet we've seen multiple times throughout this series firearms being used. And in this episode, right before one's getting banned, Officer Jenny is literally aiming it right at Ash. So who knows what's going on with 4Kids? Why did they ban it? I'm going to be watching it for the first time ever next week, so I'll find out whether the banning was justified or not. Also, why is almost every Officer Jenny's first reaction when they see Ash to try and kill him? So many of them have tried to kill him so far, but they just, sort of change their tune completely as soon as he pleads ignorance. Doesn't seem like a very good police officer attitude to have. I think the cops in the Pokemon world are pretty sus. So after Ash and his friends offer their assistance, Jenny escorts the group via jeep to the signal location, where they find Team Rocket trying to capture a group of Kangaskhan. Ash looks at his Pokedex, which says the Kangaskhan charge when in danger until they feel their young are safe. Team Rocket fires a rocket, which scares all the Kangaskhan and makes them charge towards the jeep. The group manages to escape, but Team Rocket traps all the Kangaskhan in a net. Team Rocket pulls up in a red jeep with a box full of Pokeballs and admire their catch. Jenny is unable to do anything, with the jeep engine now overheated because of an earlier incident. Jessie throws a Pokeball, but it's hit by a boomerang and sent flying back at her. Suddenly, a kid begins to yell and swings in on a vine. He cuts the net with his boomerang and sets the Kangaskhan free. The boy orders the Kangaskhan to attack Team Rocket. They are quickly surrounded and receive several tail whips before the final spinning blow is dealt and they are sent blasting off. The kid jumps into the pouch of the biggest Kangaskhan, and after his command, the entire herd walks away. Ash admires the boy's ability to communicate with the Pokemon.
I claim this Pokemon for Team Rocket! Who did that? Who's out there?
What's that sound?
What does that little savage think he's doing?
You can't have them! We caught them!
So there's quite a bit going on in this scene here. My biggest gripe is that Jessie refers to the Team Rocket motto as a poem, which is just absolutely gross. Never refer to the motto as a poem ever again, please. And why does nobody question why this random kid is living with Kangaskhan? We just get Brock commenting that he could be a good trainer and Ash sort of admiring his ability to command them, but nobody is questioning why a literal child is living with Pokemon. Nobody's going to ask, where is his parents? Why is this happening? This doesn't seem to be a very safe or healthy way to live. Just absolute negligence going on in the Pokemon world. Obviously, the character of Tommy is based on Tarzan, and Tommy is voiced by James Carter Cathcart. Suddenly, a helicopter lands and two adults come out saying they heard a report of their missing child in the area. At Jenny's request, they all go back to the station and hear that the boy, Tommy, is living in the area. His mother explains that 5 years ago, at the age of 3, the family decided to take him on a globe-trotting adventure. Tommy's father decided to hold him outside the helicopter's window, and despite his wife's warning, he dropped their son into the forest below. They managed to locate Tommy's parachute, though their search for their son was in vain. Tommy's mother then states that they received a photo of a boy leading some Kangaskhan, and thought that it might be their son. Jenny instantly recognized the boy in the photo as Tomo, the same boy who rescued the Kangaskhan from Team Rocket, and reveals that she has a directory of his details with her. Ash and his friends instantly agree to assist in the search.
Tommy was only 3 years old when we decided to take him with us on a family trip around the world.
That's correct. See, Tommy, look at all the Pokemon down there. Here, take a closer look.
Papa, be careful!
Don't worry, my dear. Tommy's having such a good time.
Tommy!
Don't worry about him, Mama. He just wants to get a closer look. What a smart boy our Tommy is.
Again, a lot going on in this scene. First off, Tommy's dad looks inbred or something. He looks just disgusting, absolutely disgusting human. Why does Tommy's mother refer to her husband as Papa? It's so creepy. And so weird that Tommy's parents don't ever actually get referred to by actual names. They're just Mama and Papa. It's super creepy. The parents, by the way, are voiced by Casey Rogers and Ted Lewis. We've also got to address just how shitty these parents are. How have you lost your kid for 5 whole years? Literally 5 whole years. Why did you not immediately go looking for it, like where you dropped the child? I mean, it's weird that Tommy had a parachute that automatically like detonates itself when he flies out of the helicopter. But like, you have proof that he landed somewhere. You saw the parachute. You found it. Look in the area. He couldn't have got far. He was 3 years old. I mean, they say that they searched for him and looked as hard as they could, but surely he was just in this like area around the safari zone. He couldn't have traveled far. Like, are they implying that they dropped him like ages away from the safari zone and he ended up there or something? I don't know what is going on here. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Also, what's the go with Officer Jenny's directory like file on Tommy? She says that he has an address and everything. Like, she's like, oh, I have his address here. Why? What? Why do you have a file on him? Why hasn't Officer Jenny ever been concerned for this kid's welfare? Just like, what is this episode? There's so many leaps of faith you have to take to sort of make this episode make any sort of sense. Later, Ash and his friends wander in the jungle, being forced to carry Tommy's parents. However, they drop them after noticing an abandoned and injured infant Kangaskhan, and Brock applies a super potion to its wounds. However, the super potion stings as it's applied, and as a result, Tommy hears the infant's cries and thinks Brock is hurting it. Brock and Misty manage to dodge the flying boomerang, which instead hits Ash's cheek. Tommy confronts the group, though Misty intervenes and demands an apology. When Tommy asks Misty if she is a person or Pokemon, she punches him and says that they are people. Tommy's parents run over and talk to him, thinking he will remember them. Misty asks Tommy to remember, though he has a flashback of being lulled to sleep by the Kangaskhan herd singing. When he claims the Kangaskhan are his family, Tommy's father smacks him with a piece of wood to jog his memory, though he only remembers his mother. His father opens his shirt, hoping Tommy remembers him, but Misty smacks him with a piece of wood and drags him away. Confused and frustrated with the revelation he has two mothers, Tommy develops a headache. Just then, Jenny's radar detects more poachers and Tommy rushes over to the Kangaskhan to help. Seeing Tommy's knee-jerk reaction to aid the Kangaskhan, his mother feels her efforts to retrieve him are hopeless, though she is reassured by her husband.
What's the matter?
You people or Pokemon?
I'm a person, you creep!
Hurry, my dear. It sounds like they may have found our Tommy.
Huh? Who you, old man?
I am Papa, this is your mama, and you are our son, Tommy.
Tommy, come home with your mommy and daddy.
They Pokemon or people?
They're peoples! People!
Oh boy, we get a baby Kangaskhan out of its pouch here. It is so damn cute. It's so adorable. This is easily the cutest thing I have seen in the anime. Well, while watching the anime for the podcast, maybe in the entire anime's run, in the entire franchise. It is so damn cute. Baby Kangaskhan is really the original Baby Yoda. That's for sure. It might even be cuter than Baby Yoda. We have come to a rather large dub edit, and part of the reason why this episode is quite strange, I mean, there's a lot of things why it's quite strange, but this is probably the most prominent one. So when Ash and his friends encounter Tommy here, the gag of Misty telling Tommy to apologise was changed for the dubbed English version. In the original Japanese, Tommy becomes focused on Misty's breasts, which the camera zooms in on. When she notices him staring and asks what, Tommy asks if he can nurse on her breasts. Misty gets very angry at him and then says, "How did that end up being your answer?" For the dubbed English version, the shot of Misty's breast was cut and he asks, "You people or Pokemon?" She gets very angry and hits him and declares, "I'm a person, you creep." However, the zooming sound effect can still be heard. Ooh boy, the Pokemon anime getting real weird. I think it's pretty clear that the writers of the show did not think for a second that this show would have like any appeal outside of Japan. So they've gone just all in on this sort of raunchier nature, which clearly in Japan they don't really mind. I mean, if you go watch something like Dragon Ball, it's just full of stuff like this. Like, this was pretty tame for, like, if it was to be put in Dragon Ball, it'd be pretty tame. But yeah, for something in like America, this is probably not going to fly. Although Tommy is clearly still staring at Misty's boobs despite the edit, so it still comes across a little bit weird here. It's also strange that they're talking about like Tommy being 3 when he was separated from his parents. I feel like 3 is probably old enough to still remember your parents. Like, I feel like I have memories from when I was 3. Like, a lot of my memories of playing like Pokemon Stadium on the Nintendo 64, I would have been like around 3 or 4 years old, so I feel like Tommy would still remember his parents. Maybe, I guess you can cover it up and say like he bonked his head and sort of had some sort of amnesia, but yeah, it seems like he'd be old enough to still remember his parents. The Kangaskhan lullaby that Tommy flashes back to here is actually really creepy. The music is just, like, the actual lullaby, it's just really not something I would want to hear when I'm going to sleep. I'd think I'm about to be put into a horror movie if I heard this while going to sleep. I think it goes without saying that Papa should be in prison for child abuse, not only for dropping Tommy out of a plane, but also for bashing his brains in with a log. He just straight up smacks an 8-year-old kid, apparently, in the head with a massive log. They're not doing a whole lot to win me over for this family, you know. We also get a similar dub edit to the previous one here with Tommy's father. Shortly after Tommy regains his memories, he says, "Hey Tommy, remember Papa?" while opening his shirt only for Misty to whack him on the head, feeling that Tommy has enough issues as it is. In the Japanese version, Tommy's father was actually asking whether Tommy remembers being breastfed, which explains why he was opening up his shirt, and Misty, still feeling sore about the breast reference, knocks him out. So just, what is this show doing? Without context, it's even weirder that he gets his shirt off. This episode is so bizarre. There's also a really weird exchange between Tommy's parents before Team Rocket's mech shows up. It must have been untranslatable or something, because it stands out like a sore thumb and it doesn't really they don't really say anything proper. Yeah, it's really just awkward. So the group finds a giant robot Kangaskhan manned by Team Rocket. Jesse uses a radio speaker to pretend to be injured, persuading the other Kangaskhan to go help it. The Kangaskhan leader attempts to stop its clan, aware that something is amiss, but they ignore it and are lured in. James fires tranquilizer darts from the robot's mouth, causing the Kangaskhan to fall asleep. Tommy arrives to find most of the herd are fast asleep and responds by throwing his boomerang, though his effort is ineffective. Team Rocket turn their attention to him, launching a rocket punch, though Tommy dodges it. At that moment, the others arrive and Ash calls out his Pokemon. Bulbasaur uses Vine Whip and Squirtle uses Skull Bash, but neither of them work against the robot. Team Rocket powers up for an attack, but the Kangaskhan break free. Pikachu and Charmander use Thundershock and Flamethrower respectively. When Tommy throws his boomerang, it hits the robot's fuel cap and the gasoline pours out, while Charmander's fire sets it ablaze. Though the robot is on fire, it doesn't slow down and begins charging towards Jenny's Jeep as she attempts to flee. Suddenly, Tommy's parents ram their helicopter into the robot in a kamikaze attack, causing it to explode. Team Rocket is sent blasting off again.
Coming to save you, Tommy!
Looks like Team Rocket's blasting off again!
So as mentioned earlier in the episode, James just guns down the Kangaskhan with a tranquilizer. Apparently that's okay, but the next episode the guns are bad. So bizarre. I'm also noticing a theme here that Ash is going to literally call out every Pokemon except Pidgeotto when we get a situation like this. It really seems like every episode he calls out all of the Kanto starters, but never his bird. It's just, give it something, you know? And one final bit of trivia here, this episode marks the first use of a mech by Team Rocket, something that would become a staple of their shtick. So everyone, including Tommy, fears his parents are dead and he begins to cry, but they suddenly emerge from the twisted debris wearing similar clothes as Tommy. They reveal that they will join Tommy and his herd, much to Tommy's delight, and the family embraces each other. The next day, Ash and his friends continue on their journey, but they're worried about Tommy and his family's future. However, the Kangaskhan herd reappear on the ridge. Tommy, his parents, and the infant Kangaskhan in the leader's pouch wave goodbye, confirming Brock's reassurances and optimism.
Do you think Tommy and his parents really can be a family?
Ash, they love each other. They'll be just fine.
It might be tough, though. After all, they were apart for 5 years.
And it's gonna be hard for him even to communicate.
Pikachu. Pika? Pika, Pika!
Huh?
Kangaskhan! I think you're right, Brock.
Like I said, they'll be just fine.
Kangaskhan!
So really, after all that weirdness in this episode, they end up at the end playing it off as if Tommy's parents have died in a helicopter crash. It just goes from being completely bizarre to strangely emotional. It's a real clashing of emotions and tones here. Also, it was kind of wild to watch an episode featuring a helicopter crash right after Kobe Bryant's death. Just real strange, real eerie. But real talk, Tommy's parents should be dead from this. They straight up kamikazed a helicopter into a big mech. They shouldn't be alive. And you know what? Overall, I hate this disgusting freak of a family. They completely disgust me. The episode then ends with the narrator tacking on a message about Ash sort of thinking about his mother. But nowhere in this episode is it ever implied that Ash has thought about his mother even once. It just, again, it stands out real weirdly. It's like Ash hasn't even mentioned his mother or even seemed like he was thinking about his mother at all in this episode. But that's it. The episode is over. What are my thoughts on it? Well, this honestly rivals Beauty and the Beach for my weirdest Pokemon episode I've ever seen. Because of that, I do like this more than the previous episode. At least in this episode, you get to be entertained by the sheer absurdity of everything that's going on here. Whereas when you watch the Flame Pokémon-athon, you're just bored to tears. The Kangaskhan Kid definitely isn't a good episode, but I wouldn't go as far as calling it boring because there's just so much weird stuff going on that you can't help but be entertained. It also introduces the idea of Team Rocket mechs, which become a staple for the series, so it's got that going for it. Overall, though, I do think this is probably the low point of this season. We're about to head into half a dozen really extremely important episodes, not only just for Kanto and the overarching plot, but for Pokemon as a franchise as a whole. So this is almost sort of like the calm before the storm. But yeah, not really a fan of this episode, but it is really absurd, so in a way I would recommend going back and watching it. So we've got a recap of major events here. Jessie tries and fails to catch a Kangaskhan, very loose definition of major event there, and Ash's Squirtle is revealed to know Skullbash, which, again, very loose definition. Ash Ketchum's win-loss record still 7 wins, 5 losses, no changes here, which brings us to our second round of Pokemail. And now my question of the episode is going to be, Baby Yoda versus Baby Groot versus Baby Kangaskhan. Which is the cutest? Personally, I'm leaning slightly towards Baby Yoda, but I mean, all three are serious contenders for the crown, and honestly, Baby Kangaskhan won me over in this episode. It was so adorable, and I want to find out what you guys think is the most adorable little baby monster, I guess. So head over to the YouTube video version of this podcast, and yeah, drop a comment below. But that's it for today's episode of Who's That Pokemon. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're not subscribed already, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, basically anywhere in the world where you can find podcasts. You can also find the show on Twitter at Who's That PKMMPod to keep up with the latest updates for the show, and I'm on Twitter as @SourceMarlow. You can also check out my YouTube channel, WTP Productions, where you'll find all sorts of Pokemon content, covering the games, anime, and everything in between. But that's all for this episode. I hope you join me next time as I take a look at The Legend of Dratini. Rather than covering 2 episodes, I'm going to focus on going in depth on just this one episode next week because it's pretty damn notable for quite obvious reasons. It's the first of the episodes that has never been dubbed into any language other than Japanese, and it's so noticeable that I feel like it deserves all the focus of an entire episode being dedicated to it. Plus, as an added bonus, by doing this as a singular episode, it means I'll be able to group the 2 Christmas-themed episodes together while also covering Electric Soldier Porygon as a standalone. So yeah, it just works out neatly if I do this as a standalone episode. We're really coming up to an extremely important period of the Pokemon anime, so make sure you join me next time.